Three, two, one.
Boom. Wow. Welcome to Monday and a new week and a new day and a new quarter, if you think about it. Everybody,
Whoa.
fortunately, the first quarter of 2021 is behind us and we are gearing up for Q2. My name is Judah Hoover. I'm a real estate investor and a realtor. This guy right over here is Josh Weidman. He's a hard money lender and a real estate investor as well. And we run the Build and Grow with Real Estate show. It's a show where we talk about how to
Awesome.
make money on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to pay your bills with real estate, but also how to build generational wealth. If anybody has any questions or feedback for us, our contact information is right above us here, as you can see,
Yeah.
and would love to hear from everybody about the show. So, Josh, uh, we I've been talking a lot about and hearing a lot about everyone saying, "Hey, this is just like last time," and
It's a
it's
bubble.
a
It's
bubble. And
oh
for the longest time, I've been like, "Yeah, I can't quite quantify or put it, into exactly why this just feels and seems and is nothing like last time." But then we did some research and we did some digging, and we were able to come up with some charts and graphs and info that we think are going to be helpful for your peace of mind, dear listener, so that you understand this is nothing like last time, but also so that you can share with other people why they should lend you money to invest in real estate or buy
mhm.
this wholesale from you or things like that. So this is information that has two folds. Number one, give yourself some confidence. Number two, use this to inspire and give confidence to other people.
Yeah, Judah, I didn't even think about that second aspect because it's really true. A lot of okay, we've talked about this before, how, some of the factors that go into the housing market and what are some of the things that impact, success or failure or an uptrending or a downtrending market, things like that. And when we look back at what 2008 was like, hindsight's 2020. We
Right.
can see exactly the cause of the financial downturn. There have been movies made about it. There's been plenty of speculation and discussion on it. The question now, I guess, that people are looking at, and it feels a lot like housing prices can't go any higher. We have record highs. We've got continual uptick. We got, overbidding on housing and stuff like that. And I think that because we had such a big downturn in 2008 and it hurt so many people, it's like a raw wound
Right.
for a lot of people, right? I mean, and not just a raw wound. I think it's also a lot of people that maybe missed that downturn and recovery. A lot of the downturn and recovery in 2008 are looking at this and saying, "Oh my goodness, this could be awesome. It's going to be another big, huge bubble bursting, and there's going to be so much money to be made." But in reality, what we're probably looking at is the normal ebb and flow that we get in a real estate market. But we don't know until we actually look at the numbers and the things that impact it. And that's really what we're going to talk about today.
Right.
All right. So let's jump in here. I mean, this stuff is really straightforward. And if you sit down and think about it after we go through the slides, I think it's the kind of stuff that you sit back and you're like, whoa, of course we're not in a bad situation. Oh, that made sense, but the why is a big deal, right? So the first one, mortgage standards are nothing like 2008, and that's a good thing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if you look at, there's a whole bunch of different ways that people came up with, and you can quantify how risky mortgage standards are or aren't. And
Mm-hmm.
even though recently there's been some loosening and tightening and things like that, I was in the mortgage industry. I started in 2002. I was in the mortgage industry the whole way up until like 2014, actively, really aggressively participating. And I got to tell you that the product mix that there used to be versus the product mix that there is now are worlds apart. And what this graph just shows is how, if anything, borrowers are overqualified for the loans that they're getting. And if anything, right now, starting around 2009, 2010, um, not only underwriting is below or is more aggressive, let's put it that way. Underwriting is more aggressive than what would generally be considered a reasonable lending standard. So,
Hmm.
if it's a reasonable lending standard that you have XYZ in the bank, right now, banks are requiring you to have XYZ plus 50%. Maybe not times two, but certainly a little bit more. Their income guidelines are stricter. Um, they're
Yeah.
also they're also I remember when, they would take a look at your 2 most recent pay stubs and 2 most recent bank statements. They're like, "Okay, it looks like Josh makes about this much. Okay, yep, great. Doesn't look like Josh has anything too big or too funky coming or going from his account." I'm going through a loan right now for my own personal house, and I gotta tell you, like, they went line by line through my 2 months worth of checking statements, and they're like, "Okay, explain this. What was this? What was going on here?" And so even though that makes it more difficult and maybe I don't want to say it makes it more difficult. It just makes the process a little bit more involved. Let's say it that way. It makes
Hmm.
the lending process a little bit more involved. But what you end up with is good quality loans coming out the other end of that system.
Well, and if you look at this graph, I think the most intriguing part of it is the difference between the product risk and the borrower risk.
Right.
Even through the turmoil and bad loans and garbage that we saw in 2005, 6, 7, with the subprime loans and the adjustable rates and all the other stuff, all that garbage, even with that, the borrower risk is still below a reasonable lending standard, right? But once you throw in the product risk, all of a sudden, that's what really became the basis of the problem. You had people thinking that their monthly payment was going to be $1,000 a month, and it jumps to 4,000 a month, and they lost their job, and this is happening. It just compounded upon itself. But I think that's
Yeah.
really interesting, and you see right now there is zero product risk out there.
Right.
It is, because the underwriting standards are what they are. It doesn't leave room for junk loans,
Right.
and that's a good thing. That's a good thing for
Yes.
the market.
I think that's really good is, the average borrower was pretty well healed and in pretty good shape. And the problem was we were lending money. We as a nation, we as a society, we as a lending institution were lending money to people who shouldn't have been. And
That's
that's
right.
where but the average, it's not like everyone was getting loans that they didn't qualify for. No, it was only a few percent that really just made the whole thing fall
Well,
apart.
what's really interesting is, like, you think back to that crisis, and we weren't really giving loans. We were creating financial products for
Right.
investors.
Right.
I mean, that's what it ended up being. All right. So, okay. Point number two is that prices are not soaring out of control. I know it feels like, man, that house that was for sale a year ago for 260 is now 325, and it seems like the whole, everything's exploding. But the truth is, when you look at the numbers in comparison to the increases that we saw in the early 2000s, it's really reasonable. I
Right.
mean, like 17, 18, 19, and 20 are all over the 3.8% annual average, but they're not, 2020 was a big jump to 9.2%. But you look back and you look at 2002, 3, 4, and 5. I mean, 2004, 12.5% average annual appreciation. That's insane.
Right. Yeah, and you had double digits back to back. The other thing that I would love we should probably do some digging here on this, Josh,
Yeah.
is the 2017 through 2020 numbers don't
Yeah.
seem quite as bad when you take into account for how much negative appreciation there was from like 2008, 9, 10, 11, and how
Yeah.
slow appreciation was 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. Like we had
Hmm.
negative appreciation and then we had very slow appreciation. So the last 4 years is a little bit hotter than average. Yeah, a little bit hotter than what, maybe even makes a lot of people comfortable. But we've also got 10 years of slow to no growth that we're making up for. And that makes me feel a whole lot better.
That's right. I mean, and I would even say that until 2019, in a lot of areas, we hadn't reached the 2006 and 2007 height of the market
Correct. Correct.
as far as price points. So, I mean,
Right.
really, we're talking about a 9% appreciation with a lot of other contributing factors. So let's see what those are. Um,
Yes.
I mean, shortage of housing on the market. I mean, this is insane, like
I
totally insane.
I didn't believe this when I saw it at first,
Yeah.
and when we first started digging into this, because I did not understand just how much. I mean, these graphs, they show you, oh my goodness, there clearly was a problem coming, and actually, if anything, we're moving further and further away from a problem. Now, we might have a new type of problem, but we are not going to run into a problem where we have too much supply on the market for the demand, and then that supply versus demand is what causes us to lose value and go in the other direction. So
Well, so
let's work.
Judah,
Go ahead.
on top of that, I mean, look at the inventory in months that we've had over the last, I mean, 4 years. The last 4 years, it's been a seller's market.
Yes.
Going into 2020, there
Yeah.
was only 3 months of inventory, 50% of what you would expect to see in
We
a
have to
balanced market.
Yeah, we just have to
What's
cover this really quickly. So, if
Yeah.
you don't know what months of inventory is, if you look at an MLS in an area in the nation, let's say, and we would
Mhm.
say, okay, we're selling 10 homes a month. So, what's the pace at which we're going to be out of homes on the MLS? If no more houses come on the MLS right now, what's the pace at which we're totally done? So, if there is 6 months worth of housing on the MLS, even though you've got money coming and going in your checking account, you kind of know what your like float is. So, you want some float there in your checking account. Well, the MLS is the same way. You've got houses coming and going, but there's like a steady float. And historically, 6 months worth of float means that that's a pretty average, stable market. When it gets above 6%, that means that it is a buyer's market. And you as the buyer can say to the seller, I don't have to buy your 3 bedroom ranch. There's like 18 other 3 bedroom ranches on the market. I can buy whichever one I want. When it's a
Exactly.
seller's market, it's the exact opposite. You as the seller can say, I don't have to take your offer, Josh, where you're only putting $3,000 down. I'm taking this offer over here where this guy's putting, $5,000 down as earnest money deposit, and he's not
Right.
even asking for inspections. So it's the seller. You have the authority, and we are, as you can see here, the last 4 years, we are going deeper and deeper and deeper into a seller's market.
Well, so and deeper into a seller's market because inventory is non-existent. I mean,
Correct.
you talk about the extremes on both sides. Were you selling houses in 2007? Like, were you
Yeah,
listing them?
I was
Yeah.
not. I was not a listing agent. No, I was not a listing agent.
No, I didn't mean like that. I flipping houses. So
Yeah,
I like
yeah,
I retailed my first houses in 2007, and guess what we had to account for? We had to account for 6% seller's assist.
yeah.
We had to budget in 3 months of marketing and sales time.
Hmm.
45 days minimum on a on a mortgage, and we were looking at what kind of concessions can we put in the house, like, oh, we'll throw in a flat screen TV for a full price offer,
Right.
we'll upgrade this or do that. That's a totally different end of the spectrum right now, where it's almost, how fast can I get this house on the market, because if I get it on now, it'll be sold by the end of the day. It, almost regardless. I mean, well, so I was looking at this house here in Palmyra. I had been negotiating with a guy. He decides to put it on the market. Okay, it is a fixer upper, small 4 bedroom house. It needs at least $100,000 in work. Okay, they put it on the market for 250. It sells for 275. Cash offer, no inspections, no contingencies. Close in 30 days or less as soon as title's ready.
Wow.
And it's from an owner occupant. I
Yeah, that's
mean, you want to talk? Yeah, you want to talk about different sides of the spectrum. It's insane. So right now, yeah, inventory is really tight. We all know that.
yeah,
Here's the
inventory tight.
second.
It's also
Yeah.
causing, I mean, as a realtor, it's also causing me to ask questions like, geez, inventory is so tight right now. Do I even need good photos? Do I even need to do this? Do I even need
Right.
like I'm
Right.
actually I'm fighting with myself. Like, do I take the time and delay 2 or 3 days and do this right? Or do I just do, do I kind of take some shortcuts? That's how fast, even though stuff was selling last time
Yep.
around, you still took the time to do everything right. And right now, I
Yeah.
gotta tell you, stuff is selling so quick, you almost have to ask yourself, what's the best use of your time?
Well, so and this is where we talked last week about about Compass going public. We've talked previously about these tech companies and like the life of a real estate agent? What's it going to look like in the
Right.
future? Agents, if you want to show your value, especially at a time like this, it hone those negotiation skills. Learn, if you're the listing agent, to tease that extra $10,000 out of the price point at the
Right.
top. Or if you're the buyer's agent, how to present your offer in a way that it's at least going to get a look. It's at least going to get a counter, and get your clients into the game. That's a big deal.
Yep.
So, all right, we got shortage of houses on the market. Second part of this is a big one. New construction is not getting it done.
Right. I've felt this for a long time, Josh, and you've heard me talk about this, and this has always
Yep.
been like my spidey sense has been tingling on this. And
Yep.
I was so glad that when we did this research and we were able to come up with this and we were actually able to show and prove that this is what it is, because we have not been building as many houses as we should for 13 straight years.
Right. Right. Now, to be fair, I think that part of that is a lot of the glut of new homes and new construction properties that were dumped on the market right at the tail end of, uh, right before the collapse. Right. You had all this new construction, whatever, and that had to be absorbed.
That's
But
that
13,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's the first 3 to 4 to 5 years, or to 3
right.
years, really. The reason it's a 7-year cycle is because it takes 3 years to absorb that, then 3 years of really building, and then, 1 year or 2 years of overbuilding. But we have been below, and we're still not above it. We're still not overbuilding based
Yeah,
on not the 10-year average, not the 40-year average, a 50-year average. When you look at we remember on Friday we talked, Josh, I said, "Hey,
yeah,
don't tell me a demographics number of just one data point. Give me at least 3 or 4." We're talking about a 50-year average here of what
yeah.
this nation needs, and the fact that we've been below it for 13 years, that is a very strong indicator that there is a need for housing in the US.
What? So, okay, good. Jeremy Bayshore. Why? Okay, here's the why, in my opinion. And this is, you just fed right into this. I think that we've had such a long upward cycle, and real estate investing in general has become more and more refined, and tech has become more and more of a part of it, that the cost for entry has become lower and lower and lower.
Mhm.
And so what you see is you have a lot more people coming in and fixing up those old beat up houses and making them new houses. I think that for a while, that's absorbed some of the demand. Not all of it, for
Right,
sure,
right.
and we can see that in the low housing numbers. But I really think that real estate investors, I know quite a few people who started investing just before 2008 or just after, started as wholesalers, hustling a couple deals, and now flip 20 or 30 houses a year.
Right.
And I mean, probably 20, or I probably know 20 people like that, right? Well, that's 400 houses a year in a very small location. And you push that throughout the country, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people doing serious volume and transitioning junky housing into quality
Right, so
housing.
what you're saying is and I don't use it as a pejorative. I hate that it's a pejorative, but, you're talking about gentrification. So what you're saying is
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I'm okay. So gentrification, I think, necessarily requires a changing in the kind of neighborhood. What I'm
okay,
talking about is there. I mean, like, you look at it. What's the name of it? Come on, Lidditz. Lidditz is a great example. Lidditz is an old town. Like the
Right.
houses are old. They're fairly well maintained in general and things like that. But there's a house down the street that's banged up and it's been sitting there for 15 years and it's been empty for 15 years. Well, over the last 5 years, everybody that has seen that house, there's a critical mass of investors that have seen that house, contacted that owner. Finally, they decide to sell. It's renovated and it's back on the market, and now it's a beautiful house.
And
I'm
there's
not
enough investors out there that
that are
there's enough investors out there like little ants running over cities that have
yeah,
identified all those houses. And if there was
right.
a quarter of the investors that there are there, some of those houses might not go, some of those houses might go unnoticed. Right now, everything that's an opportunity is getting noticed, is what you're saying.
I think it's that, and just the sheer volume of the number of investors and the number of people involved in the investor space,
Right.
that a lot of the demand for housing has been met to this point by just the number of people getting into real estate investing.
Right. Yep.
And I think that, be, yeah, and I think that we're finally to a point where new construction makes a lot of sense financially if we can figure out this supply line and lumber and construction
Well, banks are
costs.
still once bitten, twice shy, because banks, don't forget, banks took a big beating,
Yeah.
and they also had
Yep.
some regulatory changes that there was a lot of builders out there who would buy a bunch of acres and then they'd throw up, a bunch of spec homes and, they'd build, but that's there's a lot to be said for banks also not lending to builders as well.
This is a rabbit hole, but are we in an investor bubble? I think the answer is, you can answer this yourself. Go on any site that posts listings for wholesale deals and see if any of those wholesale deals make sense. If they don't make sense, we got a bubble.
Right.
Right. Anyway, all right. So let's keep going here. All right. Prices aren't too expensive to buy. Whoops.
Oh, you want to?
Sorry about that. Prices are not too expensive to buy. This shocked me a little bit.
Yep.
And maybe it's a perspective thing. But all right. So in 2002, I graduated from college. And I was working in Philadelphia and had a construction company. I was working in Philly, and my business partner started buying real estate and definitely gentrifying areas and stuff like that. And it was my first real introduction to hands-on to seeing stuff like this happen. Okay. I can remember about 2004 looking around at all of these $400,000 to $600,000 houses popping up in the suburbs.
Right.
Everywhere. McMansions, 3, 4, 5,000 square feet, all over the place. And wondered to myself, who the heck is buying these? Like, there are people that buy them, but are there this many that you need, 100 new homes in a development that are selling for 600 grand? I thought there was a bubble then.
Right.
I mean, now we've got home prices that are even higher, demand even higher, but because of increases in incomes and decreases in interest rates, we're really paying a lot less. We can afford a heck of a lot more than, or at least we're taxed and are financially pressed a lot less now than we were even in 85 to 2000. That's really surprising.
Yeah, I think that this is such a great graph because it shows just how affordable housing is right now and how
Mm-hmm.
much the average person, it's affordable for them to buy the average house, and it's only going to take 15% of their income if they're trying to buy the average house. Now, if people want to try and keep up with the Joneses and buy something that's out of their price range, then sure, that's going to happen. But when you look at median income and median housing prices, and you look at those historical numbers, real estate right now is as affordable as it's ever been. Now, listen, I'm not trying to sell you guys on real estate. I'm trying to give you guys the information for why you should feel confident to go flip real estate or get other people to be willing to invest with you.
Hey, Judah, I think that this is kind of interesting. We've done shows about the financial viability of a tenant before,
Mm-hmm.
right? How to pick the right tenant, stuff like that. What's this graph tell you? The graph tells you that the lowest percentage of median income needed to pay for housing is preferable over the highest amount. Like, I've always looked at 3 times the rent
Right.
So essentially 33% of the housing cost of the tenant's income is going towards housing. And you look at this, that seems like a really risky number almost.
Yeah, almost. Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, so you're
it's
saying
just an
it's so
interesting.
you're saying that it's that the average homeowner is actually in less risk than the average renter. That's
Right.
that's a good
I
analytics.
mean, well, it should make sense that way though too, because if the risk in lending to somebody buying a house should be very low, and the risk of renting, the tenant's not getting the equity and the ownership. You know what I mean? So there is going to be more risk there. But
Yep.
I just thought it was a significant. I mean, you're talking twice the risk as opposed to a loan today, as opposed to only 8% higher during the big recession. So it's just interesting. It's an aside. All right, people are equity rich. This is shocking. You want to
This
start,
was
Judah?
really great. This was really great. Well, because I mean, I worked in one of those subprime sweatshops where all we did was pound the phone all day and try to get people to refinance and
Hmm.
roll their credit cards in and pull out their equity. And I remember doing a refinance. The Eagles recently won the Super Bowl, but remember the first time they went to the Super Bowl, I remember a woman called me up and she wanted to refinance her house and pull some equity out so she could buy Super Bowl tickets.
Whoa.
There was a lot of refinancing going on that was then that equity was then spent. And
Yeah.
if you look at how much equity has been cashed out of houses on a 3-year, running average, or 3 years, leading up to this market versus the last market, it's just not even
Mhm.
anywhere close.
Well, and
So,
dude,
the
yeah,
dollar
I
has
think
lost value, real estate is worth more money, all these things, and still we haven't cashed out nearly as much equity. It's just crazy.
Judah, you know what's nuts? Look at the second bullet point. More than 50% of owner occupied houses in this country, more than half,
Right,
have greater than 50% equity. That's insane.
right,
It's amazing. Like that makes me feel super comfortable
right.
in this housing market.
Well, also look at that right there. The average home equity now stands at over $190,000. Remember,
Yep.
Josh, it was not that long ago that the median home price in America was $190,000.
That's
And
right.
the fact that the average person has that much equity in the average house, that just there is a ton of equity out there. And that just also one of the things that caused and one of the things that when you're in a trouble and then things get worse and get worse and get worse and get worse, one of the things that made the housing market worse and worse and worse and worse was
Yeah.
that no one had any equity in their house. And so if people had to sell, they ended up having to take a haircut and they ended up having to do short sales on their mortgages, and that hurt the bank, which then hurt their ability to make loans or be forgiving or
Yep.
flexible with other people. And it just is it it kind of adds
It's a
fuel to
spiral.
this downward spiral, whereas
Yep.
that much equity that the average person has in their house just adds so much strength and resiliency to this market that we're in. Now, I think it's very important that Josh and I say here at the end, you know, China could attack tomorrow. You know what I mean? Space aliens could show up. There
Sure.
could be a famine or a plague, or there could be there's always black swan events,
Yeah.
and there's always these things that nobody sees coming that could happen. But based
And
on
they will.
right,
And they will.
right,
Like there will be a downturn at some point.
right.
And the
Or
yeah.
or or there'll be a downturn at some point that's a healthy downturn. Like, kinda I think what
Right.
happened the last time is, I think the last real estate downturn was sparked by a black swan event that no one could see coming. The last 3 or 4 or 7 or 10 real estate downturns weren't necessarily caused by black swan events. There's no reason to believe that the next 2 or 3 or 5, I think we saw a real estate downturn of a lifetime based on a black swan event, and there will be good markets and bad markets, but we will likely never see in our lifetime, or not until Josh and I are 50 or 60, another huge downturn like that again.
I disagree, but It's okay. You don't have to agree with me. The point is that right now, housing's strong. There's nothing that's jumping out of the woodwork that says, oh, you got to be really careful. All of the factors that feed into a healthy housing market in demand and supply and inventory and interest rates, they're all pointing towards, hey, things are really strong. And we're at some point in a real estate cycle. It might be the upswing, it might be the downswing, who knows? But we're at some point. Today, things look really solid,
Right.
and it's a great time if you can grab a good deal. Great time to flip a property, buy an investment property, and lock it in for long-term financing. So anyway, all right, that's all we got for today. I hope everybody had an awesome Easter weekend. We will be back here on Thursday with another great guest. Until then, go out, make some money. Don't forget to like and share, invite your friends, and we'll see you on Thursday.